Welcome. I'm Erik Fleming, host of A Moment with Erik Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Erik Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenterik.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NBG Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to another moment with Erik Fleming. I am your host, Erik Fleming. And today, I've got two guests who are different stages of their work, but they have a lifetime of commitment, which is very similar. I have a young lady on who has established this organization to help young women, especially young Black women, achieve and to get out of, to break the generational curses or cycle, however you want to say it. And she's been doing this work for a couple of decades. And if you hadn't heard of it before, you will get a chance to hear about it today. It's incredible what she's doing. And then the other young lady I have, kind of have a bond because of the Mississippi connection. But she is a lobbyist in Washington, but prior to being a lobbyist, she has been, on Capitol Hill working with members of Congress and all that. And so we want to talk about, kind of like when we had my friend Glenn Rushing on, just kind of talk about what the atmosphere is like lobbying and, to kind of tell y'all, if you need some help, why you need to get a lobbyist, right? Especially to navigate what's going on now. So I'm real excited for you all to hear this. And as always, we need your help so we can continue this. So you can go to patreon.com/A Moment with Erik Fleming and donate or subscribe, right? And the subscription is only $1. Now, I do have tiers if you want to give more, and I got some swag attached to that if you give more. But, if you just $1 a month would go a long, long way for us to continue to do what we're doing. And when I say us, me, Grace, the good folks, and especially Leonard Young at NBG Podcast Network, just support independent podcasters, especially as we deal with the political subjects that are going on. And if you want to do the same thing I'm asking as far as donate, but you want to know a little bit more about the podcast, then you go to momenterik.com And that way you can catch up on some episodes. You can learn a little bit about me. You can see all the guests that I've had on the show. I literally had somebody ask me, it's like, well, who have you had on the show? And, I dropped some names, but I also directed her to the website so you could see. So everybody that has been on the show as a guest, you can see that. You got their bios and all that stuff. And then, there's some episodes where it's just me talking, especially the early days, right? And, but you can have access to all of that. Every episode I've ever done is on that website. So, if you're a first time person or you've been listening, but you came in a couple of years in or whatever the case may be, you can catch up with everything on there. So please check out the website if you want to leave a review, all that stuff. All the stuff I said at the beginning, I'm saying it again, but just, whatever support. But the most important thing is that you're listening to this podcast, and I am greatly appreciative of that, and I am humbled that you're doing that. So now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, it's time to go ahead and kick this program off. And as always, we kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Erik. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear an appeal regarding the legality of President Trump's executive order that restricts birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court declined to hear an appeal concerning a Texas county's removal of 17 books, including those about race and LGBT identity, from public libraries. The city of San Diego agreed to pay a $30 million settlement to the family of 16-year-old Kanoa Wilson, who was fatally shot by a police officer while fleeing another teenager who had fired a gun at him. The Trump administration threatened to withhold federal food assistance from 21 Democratic-led states that had refused to comply with a data request for SNAP recipients' names and immigration statuses. A Florida federal judge authorized the Justice Department to release grand jury transcripts from the sex trafficking case against Jeffrey Epstein. Alina Habba, former acting U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, resigned after a federal appeals court ruled her appointment was unlawful. 12 former FBI agents filed a lawsuit against senior FBI and Justice Department leaders, claiming they were unlawfully fired after taking a knee during racial justice protests spurred by the police killing of George Floyd. U.S. vaccine advisors revoked the long-standing 1991 recommendation for universal hepatitis B vaccination for all American newborns. Democrat Eileen Higgins won the Miami mayoral runoff to become the city's first female mayor. Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett officially launched her U.S. Senate campaign, shaking up the highly contested race in a state Democrats have not won statewide since 1994. Former Wisconsin Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes has officially entered the state's crowded gubernatorial race to succeed retiring Democrat Tony Evers. And Roderick Page, the first African-American U.S. Department of Education secretary, died at the age of 92. I am Grace G., and this has been A Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. Now it's time for my guest, Cheryl Ann Wadlington. Cheryl Ann Wadlington is a global change agent and leading consultant in the field of personal growth. Recognized by the White House as a 2016 champion of change, Wadlington was honored for her leadership and work in developing extracurricular enrichment for marginalized girls. The national fashion and beauty journalist founded and became chief executive officer in 2004 of the Philadelphia-based Evoluer House. Under Wadlington's leadership, the organization has delivered award-winning empowerment programs over the past 21 years to more than 10,000 teen girls of color, experiencing unique social and emotional challenges and barriers to success. The Evoluer House works to equip the most underserved and hardest to reach girls in Philadelphia with essential tools to become college-bound and career-ready, thus breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty. As a testament to its success, 100% of Evoluer program graduates attend four-year colleges and other institutes of higher learning. Wadlington is an accomplished writer, television personality, and sought-after motivational speaker who has reached millions of people through such outlets as Vogue, Elle, Self, Life and Style, Lucky, C-SPAN, NBC's iVillage Live, and NPR, with her advice and perspective published. Wadlington is co-author and contributing editor of Soul Style, Black Women Redefining the Color of Fashion, which drew much-needed attention to Black America's female style leaders from Pam Grier to Diana Ross. In 2013, she authored the critically acclaimed The Diva Girl's Guide to Style and Self-Respect to inspire girls throughout the nation to take a bold leap towards success. Wadlington served as a spokeswoman for Procter & Gamble on its hair and skin lines, and she was a national publicity director for Amdi Products. An accredited member of the press corps for New York City's annual Fashion Week, she's featured in The Tent, a 2011 documentary chronicling the ready-to-wear collections and some of fashion's biggest names. Wadlington founded Evoluer Image Consultants. For her clients at Evoluer Image Consultants, she assembled an all-star glam squad who have worked with the likes of Beyoncé, Alicia Keys, and Mary J. Blige. She also taught fashion journalism at Temple University, where she orchestrated internship opportunities for her students at some of the top fashion houses and publications in the world, including Gucci, BCBG Max Azaria, and InStyle magazine. Wadlington is a Philadelphia native and alumna of the New York's Fashion Institute of Technology, with countless proclamations for her contributions to youth development from such dignitaries as the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and New Jersey State Senate and General Assembly. She has had an impact that transcends borders. Bermuda's former Minister of Education, Dame Jennifer Smith, applauded Evoluer House exemplary program for moving girls toward greatness. The London-based NGO A Safe World for Women recognized the organization for its efforts in nurturing at-risk girls. Wadlington has also partnered with government officials in Kenya and the Kaombu County Justice and Legal Committee to empower girls in the East African nation. 1 year before Wadlington was named a White House champion of change, President Barack Obama recognized the Evoluer House for 11 years of service to young urban girls. In 2020, she was one of 10 women in the nation selected by the world's #1 beauty brand, L'Oréal Paris, as a woman of worth. And in 2022, she was appointed to the Fashion Institute of Technology's inaugural Alumni Advisory Council. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Cheryl Ann Wadlington. All right, Cheryl Ann Wadlington. How you doing, sister? You doing good?
I'm doing great. And thank you for having me on your program, your podcast.
Well, I am honored to have you, and happy holidays to you.
Same to you.
I know if you're in the United States, you're cold. I think there's only like maybe a couple of places where it's not cold this winter.
Yeah, it's cold.
Yeah. So what I want to do is start off the podcast like I normally do, is that the first thing I do is offer the guest a quote to respond to. So your quote is, "You're a has-been and you haven't helped nobody." What does that quote mean to you?
Yeah, that was a quote that my brother said, who passed away. So he said that after my first career was to be a dancer on Broadway. So, my goal was to get like 4 Tony Awards before I was 27. So I fell off stage when I was traveling in the circus in Ringling Brothers Circus as a showgirl and dancer and tore my knee up, and that was the end of my career. So my brother, who was a minister, he was wonderful. He said, "What are you going to do with your life? You're a has-been and you haven't even made it yet." So that's where that phrase comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was some tough love when I heard that in my research, but you seem to have taken that challenge and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my next icebreaker is what we call 20 questions. So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
15.
All right. When you think about the challenges our country faces, what gives you hope?
I'm going to say God, number one, but also the people who came before me, and they had it worse. They survived, so why can't I?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's pretty succinct, but that's very accurate. I always used to tell people that, whatever I achieved politically, I was standing on the shoulders of others. And so, yeah, that's pretty accurate as far as us Black folks are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of your brother's tough love, how did your family kind of influence you to be the person you are now?
Well, I come from a religious family, like pretty much like a preacher's kid, fourth generation of ministers, bishops, and all of that kind of thing. I mean, bishops that go way, way, way back. So they were strict. And I come from the kind of family that you just didn't do certain things. If you did, you would get a little whipping. So my mother, mainly, she raised 6 kids alone. My father passed when I was in 6th grade. So, and then I had 2 brothers that were ministers, and they really did do tough love. So they made sure that I grew up to be a lady because I was a tomboy. I was the absolute tomboy. I was rough. I used to play with the boys all the time and tackle football, and I would tackle the guys to the ground. And my mother, wanted to save her little daughter. So she, wanted to make sure I turned out to be something and somebody. So she quickly put me in etiquette schools, finishing schools, dance classes, performing arts schools, modeling schools, put me in beauty pageants. She did everything to make sure I turned out okay, And it's so interesting now that I'm at this age. I always say, well, that like little rough side still lives in me, but then I know how to show up, when it's time to get on stage or on TV or whatever, it just is automatic. Everything that my mother taught me and all of that grooming that she did immediately comes to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And so people who may not be familiar with you, you are like, or you have been, I think you still are, one of the more iconic stylists in the fashion industry. I think you've like styled people for like Vogue, like Patrick Kelly was your contemporary. How did you make the transition from being in that world to being involved in the genesis of the Evoluer House? How do we get to this point?
Yeah, well, when you live in a household with 2 ministers and the Bible is in the house and the preaching, and when you were young and you go to church every day of the week, you're in those revival tent type churches, foot clapping, hand stomping, you you just know better. And it's because I knew when I went to New York and I was around like all the famous people and going to the parties. And at that time, it was real partying type of situation in New York. Like they partied hard. So I always knew that there were certain things when it was time to exit. Like you hear today of a lot of things that's going on. I knew that if I got involved in certain things, my mother and the women in the church, the women who wear white would come up wherever I was and kick my butt. So it's like I had to fear God. That's why I knew better.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you say party hard, that was like the Studio 54 days. Is that what?
Yeah. And the age of me. Yeah. Yeah. And see, we had access to all of that,
Yeah.
by going to school at the Fashion Institute in New York, you get access to everything. So we had that privilege.
Yeah. So how do we create the Evoluer House? Because that was the thing that attracted me to ask you to come on. your work that you've been doing with the Evoluer House. So kind of explain what the Evoluer House is, how it got started, and what kind of programs or courses do you offer at this place?
Yeah, so it's so interesting because I know what it means when you say all roads lead home. I started in the church and got in the world of glamour, and then all roads lead home. I wind up getting right back to where my foundation was, helping people, giving back. So that is who I am, and that is instilled in me, from the family. So the Evoluer House got started was right after my brother said, like, okay, you're a has-been. You haven't even made it. What are you going to do? And he said, why don't you help somebody? And that just stuck in me. And it was just a natural transition kind of to go from the world of glamour to helping young girls because I had all of that opportunity. And I could have easily wound up maybe in prison or somewhere else because I had to go to reform school, So, but yet I turned out to achieve all of my dreams and do everything I wanted to do and reach the top of my field. So I said, if I can do that with the way I was as a young girl, I think anybody can do it. So I decided to help girls who look like me to strive for excellence. And I also knew a lot was missing, in this society. Because like I told you earlier, my mother and them, they didn't stand for certain things, and I know I've seen, because I taught school for a minute, and I see that they tolerate a lot from today's generation, and they're afraid to say something. Well, I knew I'm not afraid. So the type of programming that we have at the Evoluer House, which means grow and change, is the French term for grow and change. I decided to implement program, but have set the bar high and have a level of a standard of excellence. We serve girls from underserved communities, ages 13 to 18. The programs that we provide, and our target audience is girls of color, the girls who need help the most. We have youth workforce development program. We have a personal development program. We have a podcast where girls learn how to monetize their own podcasts or have a podcast business. And we have an e-news letter, which is full of job opportunities, scholarships, great stories that interest teen girls, but that's circulated to over 4,000 girls across the United States. We went nationwide after the pandemic, but we're here because of the need. We're not just here doing some girl program like a lot of other organizations. We provide evidence-based programming, some of the issues. People do not know how much Black and brown teen girls are suffering in our community. For a time, they thought it was just men and boys. But some women went to President Obama years ago and told him and said, hey, you got the program my brother's keeper, but what about our girls and how they were suffering, the fact that they were being pushed out of school, the school to prison pipeline. And a lot of people don't know that Villanova University did a study, and it said if you are dark skinned, you a girl, you're still 3 times more likely to get suspended from school. There's a consensus among teachers. It's kind of unspoken, but it's in another report that what white teachers, and majority of the teachers are white, what they think of Black girls. Some of them think that they're oversexed and that they don't know how to stay in their place. That kind of mentality reminds me of slavery. So, that also says when a Black girl, say, for example, may walk into a classroom, she doesn't stand a chance because she's judged differently. She looks upon differently. So we do know that our girls are traumatized from just basic discrimination and the barriers that they face. So, I said, well, I want to do what I can to see to it that Black and brown girls thrive. I don't mean just graduate high school. Our goal is to make sure they graduate high school on time, go to a 4-year college, not to say that college is kind of getting unnecessary now, but to attend a 4-year college, because I believe it's still provides theory for young girls. And also it teaches you how to count your money, which is a big problem when, even if you're young and then all of a sudden you make $1 million, you hear time and time again of people losing their money. So financial literacy is very important for us. So to attend your 4-year college and to help break that cycle of intergenerational poverty, because Philadelphia was number 1 of metropolitan cities with high poverty. So to me, it doesn't make sense for a child to go hungry and for her not to have an opportunity to be her best and to reach her dreams, no matter what zip code she comes from. And so what our approach to developing, raising powerful girls is and before you educate, you have to heal her. So that's our whole concept that we use at the Evoluer House.
So do you think that the discrimination piece, what these young girls face in school, is the biggest challenge they face? And if
racial trauma. It's not just the kids. It's like our mothers, grandmothers. We all suffer from racial trauma, and most of us have not healed. We didn't even know that it existed. But no, but now we see, and I'm just thankful that I was able to think critically about the approach that I think is good to use to reach these girls. And our outcomes have been great because, of course, you have this system. The system didn't work. It did not work for girls of color. This is what I'm seeing. So we're seeing great outcomes. Our outcomes are 100% graduate and go to college, and you might have read them, or some form of a higher education. 51% go on full ride scholarships. 51% come out of college debt free. So, but even on the more darker side, like I remember at graduation, we heard one little young girl, she said, if there had been programs like the Evoluer House, I wouldn't have even thought about killing myself. So, the suicide rate for teen girls of color, it is through the roof. It's really a crisis. And it went up to something like 182% of years ago. And it hasn't gotten any better. So you have young girls who are, taking themselves out at alarming rates because of whether it's bullying or anything, they just feel hopeless.
So how does the house help deal with that trauma, help with because when you're talking about suicide and all that stuff, you're talking about self-esteem and public pressure. And like you said, the racial trauma. How does the house help those young girls? Is it because you've got them in an environment where everybody has an opportunity to thrive? I mean, kind of like, what's the secret sauce in your opinion? How that works?
Yeah, well, what we do, we just show them that we love them, which is what they're missing in school. So our teachers, number one, we're very careful about who we hire because of the research. Teachers don't care. And it doesn't matter, actually, from what I'm seeing, if they're black or white. I mean, if you're working in an educational system where you don't have to do certain things to teach kids, I mean, they don't do it. So our educators, we have educators, and we've been lucky because we've been around 21 years. I want to mention that. They're at the master degree level, first of all. We've had some PhDs as teachers, but what I found, they didn't work out right. Sometimes they're too systematic, and the girls didn't like them. They didn't like and so we listened to our girls. So we have a lot of classes that deal with mental health. And one thing we do, we make sure we hire teachers who have a certain level of compassion, which is missing. Things that happen in communities of color are like no other. And it's hard for white people to understand that, whatever's going on in the household. So that's one thing. We really, really vet our teachers. We also have a lot of classes that deal with mental health. We have identity class because we have a large number of students coming in saying they don't know if they're gay or straight. They're questioning. So that's something brand new. I know they got all of these rules and really they were kind of recent to deal with the LGBT community. But I remember one year we had like 75% of the girls said they were gay or questioning or something like that. So that is something you have to know how to deal with. Some of the classes we have are identity. Who do you think you are? The sisterhood, how to get along with your sisters. That's a real big problem. Really, that's a real big problem among particularly Black women. They have a class called intersectionality. We have a class called Title IX. It has some heavy classes. Title IX, girls' rights in education, to know your rights because girls are being treated like crap in school. So we want to teach them how to protect yourself and how to deal with situations. If you're getting suspended, these are your legal rights and this is what you can do. So you just can't get kicked out of the school. Of course, they have the other classes, financial literacy, resume writing, but we let the girls know that this is their house. The classes are interactive, it's minds on, hands on. The girls talk to us. We make them talk to us. So it's a different kind of classroom. I was just talking to a big organization today who want to come in and work with us. And so I asked them, I said, well, what do your workshops look like? And they really couldn't tell me. I mean, they were saying that, oh, we use the PowerPoint and this is how we teach the girls. And so you can't do that online with students. You can't just put in a PowerPoint and lecture to a child. We don't allow anybody to come in our classrooms and lecture to the girls for over 10 minutes. After that, it has to be an interactive experience.
Yeah. So my mom established the first teen clinic in the city of Chicago. She worked for the Department of Health.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was groundbreaking. But, because she was a health educator, it was more focused on dealing with sexually transmitted diseases and pregnancy and all that. But she would try to kind of get into what they were thinking and all that stuff. But your class, what you just laid out, if those young ladies that, were exposed to that, I think my mom's job would have been a lot easier because there's a whole lot of components that lead to certain activities.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that you over these 21 years have figured out, all right, we need to address this. We need to go after that. And you seem to be very, very flexible in doing that. And that's pretty awesome. You're definitely steps above the public education system as we know it in the United States now, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, another thing is we ask the girls when we have to update the classes, what do you want to learn? Now, of course, we can't take everything in that they say, but say, for example, with our podcast, we may have girls who are on the spectrum. So they decided that they wanted to do a podcast about what it's like to be Black, queer, and on the spectrum. Now, you don't hear that conversation coming out of girls' mouth. So we want their voices to be heard all throughout the world because when you think about it, the young girl of color, particularly the Black girl, has historically been invisible. Everybody thinks she's okay, but she's not okay. So we allow our girls we encourage them to use their voice and show them that their voice matters and can make a difference.
Yeah. How has the current political climate impacted your nonprofit work? Has it had an effect on the students? Has it had an effect on you raising money? Has it had no effect at all as far as what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I guess I would say, am I going to let it impact us? Again, I draw on those indigenous things that we did in the past that made us come over and get through it. So we're not going to let it. I always talked about federal funds for years. I said, you got to think twice if you want to take federal funds because people can control your work. So we were lucky where we minimized that. I think the impact for us is the ability to take certain books is out of the libraries, out of schools, that sort of thing, minimizing our Black history. I think that's traumatizing to Black Americans across the board, whether you're young or old. So that, and it's almost like you can't listen to everything. I think all Black people need a therapist, but these days, self-care is big at Evoluer House for the girls as well as our instructors, because some of the things that we deal with is very heavy. It is absolutely heavy. So we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves because, like we're hearing, like what you said in the political client, you're actually hearing that people don't like you because of your color of the skin, like that something's wrong with you. So you got to make sure that that you're doing things to feel good. You have a circle of friends. You have a network that is supportive. It's so important. And self-care is something that not only do we have like rules at Evoluer House for staff, we also instill that with the girls. You got to do self-care. For Black women, it's a must.
Yeah. So since you mentioned government, the concept of the Evoluer House manifested from work that you were doing with the city governments in Camden, New Jersey, and in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to see other local governments do to help empower underserved girls throughout this country?
Other cities, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That's really deep because every city has their own government. That's going to take a lot of work. And then, some cities have corrupt governments. I'm just being honest, because I've seen it. I had to experience, getting money from wherever it came from, federal or whatever. And next thing you know, the money's stolen by a government system. And so just children have to suffer because the program has to end because of that. So you were saying, what did you say? You asked me about how does government impact?
Well, what would you like to see other cities do? But based on that little short answer you gave, it sounds like it'd be better that it's a nonprofit organization outside of local government rather than being connected with government.
I think sometimes you got to watch it. Yeah, you do. And I'm being honest, and this is my experience. I know locally, I was just shocked at the way government would treat children of color and what they thought was acceptable. So, again, it's this mindset that we don't have to do anything or we don't have to do much, or, you could throw crumbs to the poor little Black and brown kids.
Yeah. Well, as somebody that's been an elected official and has had to fight those battles inside of the Capitol or inside of halls of government, I definitely understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And I am not just trying to say, oh, well, you got to have government to do it. But, I just wanted to kind of get your opinion about that, because there's a lot of people that feel that way, that it's like, I don't trust the government to do this and all that. It don't matter if I got some good people in government that I trust and they'll fight for us and all that. It's just the system is so messed up that we've got to do what we need to do. We need to be self-sufficient to deal with our children.
Yeah. So that's why I do what I do the way I do, because the system has failed us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So COVID kind of forced the Evoluer House to go virtual. Was that a blessing in disguise for you?
It was. It really was, because that's how we went national. The minute we put the word out there that registration was open, girls came from Atlanta, Texas, Arizona. They came, and then we got our first international student from Liberia. I don't know how she found us, but social media is, the World Wide Web. So yeah, it was actually a blessing. Now, the unfortunate thing, we have parents that died. A lot of parents died. The kids had to go out and work to support the family. Then they got sick. And I think the impact that it had, particularly on the Black community, that it's not talked about much. It was a terrible impact. And even I had caught COVID, and I do everything I can now not to catch it again. Because a lot of times we have a succession plan in place, but a lot of times when the leader, dies, the dream dies. So, people are always asking me, and I think it's out of their pure ignorance, when are you going to go back in person? I want to see you in person. In person sounds good, but they just got like little peaks of COVID popping up, and we're just not ready to go back because also your employees, if they catch COVID, they can sue you. So we're not ready yet. And the fact that if we can get our outcomes and do powerful sessions online, I mean, our outcomes are amazing. Why do we have to really rush to get back in person, which is somebody else's wishes? So, a lot of times, people aren't really doing great work in person, but, we've managed to be able to really serve our girls well and with quality programming.
Yeah. So the challenge of, like you said, it's like it started off in-house. You've branched out now through the internet, but you're still getting the same outcomes as you were getting when you had the girls like in your physical presence. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you're getting the same result, why mess with it? Just consider it an opportunity to continue to grow. So speaking about growing, let's close this out by, since this is the holiday season and people like to give during the holiday season, how can people support the work that you're doing at the Evoluer House? And how can people get in touch with you if they want to get some ideas about how to do something similar, or just, how you get through the day, whatever? How can people reach out to you and support the Evoluer House?
Yes, so they can contact us through our website, which is evoluerhouse.org. And they can follow us on social media to get an idea of some of the things that we're doing on social media, on Instagram, and it is the Evoluer House. On Facebook and Twitter, it is Evoluer House. So we welcome you to come and connect with us. But I'm easy to get in touch with. I just ask that you call we like to talk about how can we help our girls. So if the conversation isn't about helping our girls or giving us money, you might not want to call. Also, I'm going to say right now we have a online auction going on, but this is airing Monday. It's going to end this week, but you can always give too. You can donate on our website. We're always looking for grants and money. It takes a lot of money. It costs more than $1,000 per girl to educate our girls, and we get out there and have to raise that money. So we could always look for support.
Well, Cheryl Ann Wadlington, let me just say this to you. I think that not only did you accept your brother's challenge, but you've gone above and beyond. I think it's one of the most incredible success stories is out there. I'm glad that you have been recognized for the work that you're doing, but I still think that, you and others that are trying to help our children need to be uplifted. So that's why I offered the invitation for you to come on, and I am greatly honored that you accepted, and I hope you continue to have great success, because I have a selfish interest. I want Black children, male and female, to survive and thrive and live abundantly in this country. So I definitely want you to continue to succeed. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you again for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, guys, and we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it is time for my next guest, Kristen Torres. Kristen Torres. She is a public policy strategist with more than a decade of experience at the intersection of advocacy and legislative strategy. She is the founder of Torres Consulting LLC, where she leads federal advocacy efforts that elevate nonprofits, local governments, and mission-driven organizations on Capitol Hill. Her work includes connecting clients directly with decision makers in Congress and federal agencies. Previously, Kristen served as a senior legislative assistant in the U.S. House of Representatives, advising on immigration, labor protections, voting rights, early childhood, and child welfare. She has advanced legislation, secured community project funding, and led initiatives to expand healthcare equity, mental health and public safety, and worker protections. She also served as senior policy director at First Focus Campaign for Children, where she managed the national coalition and led successful campaigns to expand Medicaid access for youth formerly in foster care. An HRSA grant recipient and policy fellow in Washington, D.C., Kristen holds a BSW from Mississippi College and an MSW from the University of Alabama. As a single co-parent of two teenagers, she brings a lived commitment to making public policy accessible and ensuring that communities most impacted by federal decisions have a voice in shaping them. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Kristen Torres. All right. Kristen Torres, how you doing?
I'm well. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm honored to have you on. I noticed something about you and I said, yeah, I need to have her on. I usually try to get people that are doing things and they may not get all the headlines. And in your profession, you more than likely don't want to be in the headlines, being a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. But I wanted you to come on because I had a classmate of mine who was a lobbyist for a long time, and he's been on the show, and he's from Mississippi. And so I wanted to, because I knew that you had that Mississippi background, I wanted to get your perspective on what's going on because he went to like a firm after he was a staffer for a long time. And you kind of have the same path, same background, although you were a staffer more recently than him. So I definitely wanted to pick your brain a little bit about what's going on.
Absolutely.
So you're familiar with the show. So the first thing I'm going to do is offer you a quote. And your quote is, "Advocacy is not just about influencing policy. It's about improving people's lives and opening doors for communities that are often left out of the conversation." What does that quote mean to you?
So, yeah, I think it's been sort of the platform for my newly started firm that I've been working on this past year, but also my advocacy work on the Hill. A lot of trying to make sure that's not only the big pharmaceutical companies, the large corporations that are getting a say in policy, although they do. I mean, it's clear they get a lot of folks on the Hill. But where some of my work, I specifically sort of cut my teeth in policy in the child welfare space. And so a lot of organizations that work in the foster care industry, keeping families together, preventing child abuse and neglect, they're very small firms, very small organizations with limited capacity to sort of get their stories to Capitol Hill. And so as a staffer, I would be, on one hand, I handled those sorts of organizations, economic policies, et cetera, but I also had a defense portfolio. I know on the House side, you tend to have a lot of portfolios at once, but it was just very, very, very apparent that when the defense lobbyists would come in, they didn't have to give me a lot of stories. They didn't have to try to win me over. All they would do is say, "We wrote this bill for you. Put it in front of your boss, see if she says yes or no." Versus the nonprofits, the small organizations, they have to do so much work to try to get members of Congress to even understand why their issues are so important. And so I think that's been a big part of my work. I am a social worker by trade, which I know you have a lot of social workers on the podcast. And so this has sort of been sort of an extension of that work that I do.
Social workers rule the world, right?
We do.
All right. So now the next icebreaker is 20 questions. So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
I'm going to go right down the middle, 10.
All right. What one fact do you wish people who voted differently than you in the last election knew?
Do I wish they knew? Sorry, could you repeat that?
What one fact do you wish people who voted differently than you in the last election knew, I guess, about you?
That's interesting. Uh, I think there's been a little bit, I am, coming from a very red state and working more on the progressive policy side. There's always this just sort of misconception or this idea that, you know, I've been indoctrinated or infiltrated by, some foreign alien. But I think it's because of my growing up where I did and coming out of, very rural areas of Mississippi with policies that are just not great for the people that live there and for the state in itself. I think that has sort of pushed some of my current political ideology. Anyway, all that to say, I think I wish people knew that I do understand, and I understand sometimes the arguments that come from both sides, and I still choose where I am today.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So how did a girl from Central Mississippi become a lobbyist on Capitol Hill?
It's a great question. One in which I will selfishly plug. I'm hopefully I have started a draft of a book to try to answer that question. I think it's not rooted in anything just like bam, this one huge event. I think my life is sort of scattered of a lot of different occurrences along my journey that sort of, chipped away at some of my I came from a very religious fundamental Christianity community, which obviously impacted or influenced my political beliefs. And so throughout my life, I've sort of been trying to untangle those two and see what that looks like. But I will just say it has been a series of small personal instances and throughout my journey, meeting with folks who did not believe or grow up the same way that I did, hearing and listening to stories of others whose journey was just very different. Even as a child growing up in Mississippi, I grew up, as I'm sure you know, it's still, regardless of government sanctioned or not, it's still very segregated. Churches, schools, communities. And so my journey growing up in Mississippi was very different from some of my Black classmates and other colleagues that I've met throughout my, growing up. And so I think a lot of it's just been a lot of story, a lot of listening to other stories, a lot of empathy, a lot of, hey, maybe this makes sense to you, but let me show you another reason why this doesn't make sense. So
yeah,
it's a long path.
Well, I understand. So where in Mississippi did you grow up?
So I went to high school in Lawrence County, so Monticello, Mississippi. But my parents, we lived in a small community called New Hebron, near Prentice, and and then my grandparents lived in Leake County, so Carthage, Mississippi.
Okay. Yeah. That's Central Mississippi. There's no doubt about that. And you ended up going to Mississippi College.
Well, so yeah, I guess I didn't really fully answer your question. So I grew up as a preacher's kid. My dad's a pastor, very charismatic and very admired pastor, still is, in Raymond, Mississippi now. And that was something that I always kind of looked up to. And I thought, I want to do something similar, modeled after that. For women, there are not a lot of options for that. And so I originally went to the theology school. Wow, that's a tongue twister. To study Christian counseling. And it was, sort of my version of what my dad was doing. That was around a time where I started being introduced to different cultures and different, political stances and just life, right? I was 19 years old. There was a lot of transitioning happening. And from there, I was introduced to the field of social work, counseling, helping, but with a little bit of a twist, right? And so from there, I decided after I went back to school for my master's, the University of Alabama has a program where you can go to DC for a fellowship. And that was around 2015, which, as you know, there's a lot happening in the country. And I just made the decision there that I wanted to start speaking out on some of these broader issues.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So my desk mate, who ended up being Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, that's his alma mater. So, and then I represented part of Clinton. So my district didn't go all the way to the campus, but I was like right there. Because the campus is like downtown for those of y'all who are not from Mississippi. downtown to the highway is what they say. So what is
Or the McDonald's, sir.
That's right. That's right. What is the most glaring difference you see now as compared to when you worked as a staffer?
That's interesting. I've only been off the Hill for a year. I celebrated my 1-year anniversary this summer. And I think on a personal note, as a staffer, I'll just say people are constantly coming to you, giving you information, giving you things, and you sort of, sort through it, but you never are like seeking out information. And just on a very logistical level now, being off the Hill, I am the one now looking and saying, hey, can you get me information on X, Y, and Z? Or, how can I find out what really is happening based off of this news article that I just saw? So that's been one just on the logistical side. I think the other thing is, because I am no longer sort of tied to a specific member of Congress or district, I have a little more ability to work. I will say bipartisanly. I do a lot of bipartisan work, but it does give me just a little more breadth in who I'm able to reach out to and talk to versus I was sort of working with a certain group of members when I was a staffer. If that's helpful.
I guess the other question I want to ask is how did somebody from Mississippi end up working for a representative from California?
Yeah, a lot of people ask, and I'm sure, it's the same. Maybe, I don't know if it's the same on the state level, but when hiring assistants, they're looking for both policy expertise in the areas in which the member has to focus on and wants to focus on, as well as familiarity with the district and or state that they are from. So for me, the particular office had a very specific policy ask that they were looking for in their child welfare, child care, human services, as well as their civil rights and immigration. So it's hard. Usually folks don't do the intersection of those two. And I happen to have that experience. My family, my dad, my grandmother is Native Hawaiian. His family lived both in Hawaii and in Southern California. So I do have a lot of family still out in Southern California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause usually the Congress people try to get people, definitely for in their districts, they pick people from within the state. But in Washington, a lot of people pick people from their state because they don't trust anybody. When they get there, and they want to have a connection to home, and so that's why they'll bring people up. So it gives people from respective states. It doesn't matter if it's Mississippi, Georgia, Idaho, Wyoming. It gives people from those places an opportunity to start a career in DC if they want to.
And that's actually another point that I should have brought. I do have, my political views are very progressive and democratic, and so they're not, from Mississippi. We got the one member of Congress that I have the option to work for, and at the time I did get to meet him and speak with him, and he was like, "I've got a student from every school currently." So yeah, we do have to kind of get creative in who we reach out to.
Yeah, well, at least he got to meet you because you were a student in his district, so that's important. But like you said, when you only have one option, you kind of limited on what they could do. How much of a challenge has the current political climate been to your work as a lobbyist? And I understand it's only been a year, but how has that been? Because you said you have a bipartisan clientele. So how is that working out?
Yeah, I think it goes to your point of that trust. There's a lot of mistrust of people across the aisle. And that's gotten much more inflamed over the last few years, since this last election, I would even say. And so because I have worked for a Democratic member, sometimes that immediately shuts a lot of doors for me in a current administration that is on the opposite side. And so I think that's been something that's been really hard to deal with. I am very, being from the South, it is something that, we talk SEC, right? We talk all things football and farming, and there's a lot of camaraderie amongst the members. But I've seen that less and less over the past year or two. A lot of things that used to sort of bring us together, where we could agree on, I think folks are a lot less willing to sort of be in the same room with other folks and there's just so much distrust. Are you recording me? Are you going to, put this in the papers? So that's been challenging, especially when part of my job is to introduce clients to administrative agencies. So that's been something that I have really, really struggled with in this first year. When I initially left in July, I'll be honest, I kind of thought we were going to be having a Harris administration. And so I had a lot of friends in the Biden admin and it, on a business level, it sounded like a good idea, but it's definitely been something I've been working on this past year.
Yeah. I know in politics, you got to kind of hedge your bets a little bit. Never forget when, the last time I ran for the U.S. Senate, that was in 2008. And, in Mississippi, it's a hard nut to crack to be a Democrat running statewide. But it was so funny, like around starting in August of that year, people started sending me resumes. And I thought I was like, I think I could win this thing. I mean, people were sending me resumes. They were like, look, because of course Obama was running that same year. And so people were like, well, he's a black guy. Obama's a black guy. It might happen, especially in Mississippi, right? So, and so I definitely know about hedging bets. And I was just flattered that people were doing that. And
How do you, by the way, that state run race, in such a state like Mississippi is a feat in itself.
Well, yeah. But 2006 fell kind of in that, but it was a different vibe then too, because it was right after Katrina. And so a lot of people said that, I should have saved all my eggs for that one big shot. But if I didn't run in 06, I wouldn't have been a better candidate in 08. Right. And to have the opportunity to do that twice. And a lot of people say, well, it's Mississippi. You probably was unopposed. I said, no, I literally had in the span of those two primaries, 5 or 6 opponents. Wow. So I had to actually run in a primary contested and then get in there. But yeah, it's just a different vibe, but it's doable. It's not, I guess people could say it's courageous now, but I never looked at it as being courageous. I think that, good people should run no matter how imperfect you are as far as life or if your heart's in the right place, then you should, if you want to run for public office, you should run. Jesse Jackson said, I'm not a perfect servant. I'm a public servant. Right. So I never looked at it as being courageous, but I appreciate your kind words on that. So how has your background in social work helped you being you kind of talked about the specifics dealing with child welfare, but is there a skill set in social work that helps you become a better lobbyist?
Absolutely. And I still work with students from the University of Alabama and other social work schools across the country who are looking to get more of their students into the public policy world. And that is because, yes, there's a skill set. One, originally in your clinical teachings, you're taught empathy, you're taught the ability to listen, to engage your clients where they are. And that was a huge skill for me on the Hill. My member of Congress was a psychologist, so she also had a very similar approach to listening to constituents and dealing with constituents. And I felt I was very lucky to have someone to sort of mirror that after. And I felt a lot of the folks that came into our room appreciate it. Whether it was something we agreed on or not on the policy, I do think there's always that level of listening and understanding that I was taught during my undergrad degree. The other thing is realizing unintended consequences. So I think that's something that as a social worker, you're taught on both the macro and micro levels, that taking something on its face doesn't mean that's how it's implemented or how it actually turns out in real life. Giving a family, I don't want to get into specifics, I guess, but I think, what may seem like a good idea for a moment and helping to empower a family may actually not be something that empowers them in the end. And so in policy development, having to look at that a lot. And sort of distinguished me from my colleagues who had a law degree and other degrees because they are taught very much to look directly at the letter of the law. And I think my skill set came in and saying, I see that, but I want to kind of like talk to you about what might be, some hidden biases here or some things that may actually show up that disproportionately impact certain communities. And I feel like I absolutely attribute that to my social work background.
Yeah. And you develop a skill set where you can build trust too, because in order to be able to help a client, you have to have the trust of that client. And that kind of goes back to something that you said in the answering the last question, which you distracted me because you flattered me. That I wanted to bring up was that, when I was in the legislature, I remember the lobbyists would come and say, hey, look, I want to have a dinner with the committee. They go to the committee chair, and it didn't matter, Democrat, Republican, dog, cat. We all showed up, right? And that kind of helped me as a legislator get to know my colleagues because it was an informal setting. But, I've heard reports at the state level and to some degree at the federal level that now the lobbyists just pick a side, right? That it's like, since the Republicans are in charge, then we'll just entertain the Republicans and not worry about the Democrats because, we figure they're probably not going to either vote our way or they don't have the influence to get something through. So why waste our time? And I just thought that was insane. I said, when I was a lobbyist, I was trying to get every member to vote for what I was pushing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I wanted to be able to go to my boss and say, look, 122-0. That's the goal to me. But now all of a sudden it's just like, well, we get all the Republicans, we're in. I mean, how is it like working in that vibe?
Just as you think it might be. It is discouraging. I have several mentors that have been, worked in Congress decades ago and even, 5-10 years ago who have talked to me, this is how it used to be, very much similar to what you just described. And Congress is very different these days. A lot of folks they call it broken. But I think one of the things is, it has become such a partisan divide. And because we are it's 50, we're 2 votes off in the House. It's a very slim majority. And so trying to think of strategy to push something forward, you do have to sort of focus on, okay, let me tailor my messaging towards one party and let me talk about my client's needs in a way that they will understand and that they might be sympathetic. And then you sort of pivot and turn to another party and say, okay, I want to talk about the same issue, but I want to put it in words that maybe you appreciate a little more. So there are not really options where you have everyone in the same room. But I do know there is this, an increasingly number of folks that are looking to, stay within that bipartisan margin.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a classmate from high school and she stayed in Chicago and she had a niche because, Chicago's a heavily Democratic city, but people run as Republicans from time to time. And so she basically she had built a business where it's like, all right, you Republican candidates, you want to win in Chicago, let me do your messaging for you, right? So you can relate to these people that you're trying to get to break a tradition. So I think it's a very important skill set that you have to be able to go up to somebody from, I don't know, I'm going to pick a Wyoming, the representative from Wyoming who's a Republican and ask her, hey, look, I need you to look at this. Yeah. And turn right around and go grab somebody from New York State and address the same issue, but put it where they can understand. That's a very special skill set you have to have.
Yeah. And I think it's only our current situation has only inflamed that. I think there used to be, there were ways that you would talk about things that, you would try to think, oh gosh, sort of tailor, how you talked about a certain topic. But now there are words on both sides that you can't use. You can't use certain words or they immediately block you out because, the media, social media has sort of said, this means this. And so, yeah, it's a very fine line and takes a lot of just listening.
Yeah. Why do you think there's a negative connotation associated to lobbying?
Lobbying. I think partly what I mentioned up front is that historically, access to lobbying has been big money, large corporations, large, big pharma, et cetera. And I think, and I won't say it's just a theory. I would say even in practice, those are generally the ones that get their voices heard by a member of Congress over a large portion of their constituents. And so I think that rightfully so has sort of followed through with the term. I do think there is an effort to sort of expand who has access to lending their voice to members of Congress and to the agencies and to the administration. It's a David and Goliath fight for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Lobbyists used to get mad at me when I was in the legislature because I would introduce like 150 bills a year. And they say, there's no way you could pay attention to all that. And I said, if I came up with the bill, I probably have a good sense of what I was pushing.
Yeah.
They said, why do you do that? And I said, well, obviously you don't want to work because
Yeah.
if I didn't introduce this bill, we wouldn't have a conversation, right? And they just kind of like nod their head. That's it. I mean, it's a vital part of the process, which leads me to my next question. Why should people and organizations hire a lobbyist?
I think the same reason that big corporations do. I think there is just such a large misunderstanding of the process, and maybe purposely so. It's just so wonky in the weeds. There are a lot of processes and things that, unless you do it on a daily basis, it's just doesn't make sense. And so having someone to navigate that for you is really important. It's not just enough to tell your stories, unfortunately, to come before Congress. It is part of the process. And as I talk to social work students and other students across the country, I'm always, making sure that they're out there telling their story. But sometimes when you're coming, for instance, when I was a staffer and I would have organizations come to me with their stories, I would feel a lot of empathy. I would want to do something, but I didn't know what to do because they didn't have the training to give me a result or a result that they would like to see. Or, they just came to me to fix the problem. And unfortunately, I didn't have the ability to fix their problem. And so sometimes if you have a lobbyist, the lobbyist is able to look at what are the things Congress is focused on, what are the committees looking at, what are their jurisdictions, what do they care about, are members, is there an appetite to move such? And, I think a lobbyist helps to navigate a lot of that. In addition to some of the just logistics, like, hey, this is how you set up a meeting, with your member of Congress. This is how you go in. And this is, if you want to get to the member, you got to bring a constituent. If you want to, educate this 21-year-old staffer, don't throw a report at them. Let's give them a bullet page, a one pager. So a lot of things like that, I think is really important in moving something. And so if I think that's the goal of your organization is to move legislation, I really think it's important to have someone to help you navigate it.
So I'm going to say this, and it may come across as negative, and that's fine. I'm used to getting blasted every now and then, but I think a lot of people that have causes, have egos attached to the causes, right? So it's like, it may be something that you're really passionate about, and in your home state or, wherever you're based, if you're nationally based or whatever, you can persuade the people in your organization. You can preach to the choir. But when you go up to the United States Congress or even your state legislature, right? These people are not easily persuaded. They got elected because they could persuade people. And so, the way that you can rouse a crowd or get people to show up to a meeting and all that might not speak the language of the people that you're trying to get to vote for something that will have a positive impact for you.
Absolutely.
So you need to have somebody that's familiar with, the old phrase is know where the bathrooms are, right? To be able to speak the language, go in, do what needs to be done, blah, blah. And even if your role is just to say, okay, your assignment is to talk to this representative, that representative, all that's invaluable compared to just showing up. It's not like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. It's like you just show up and it's like, I have a great idea and I'm going to convince Congress to vote for it.
Absolutely.
It's not Pollyannish like that, but yeah.
Yeah. And in a world of, new technology as well, as in the 10 years ago, staffers didn't have laptops. Only post COVID have they now, each staffer has a laptop so they can now work from home and things. Auto calls, different organizations and grassroots have these, automatic calls or sign on, send this letter to your member of Congress. And so our daily intake of things has increased as a staffer. And so if you're competing against, other very important, priorities, things that might be making national headlines, you need that little extra edge to kind of make sure that you are getting into the right spots.
Yeah. What was the most complex issue that you had to navigate on Capitol Hill, either as a staffer or currently as a lobbyist?
As a staffer, so I worked under Congresswoman Judy Chu during the time of the mass shooting in Monterey Park in California. And that there was a lot to understand and unwrap. I mean, most of the people these days have at least been in a jurisdiction or a community that has been impacted by mass gun violence. This particular community, a large immigration large immigrant community, a lot of different things impacting the way that they reacted to the mass shooting. So, for instance, there was a business in some other jurisdictions. It helped to raise awareness. They helped to bring, memorials to the site to make sure to memorialize those that had lost their lives. But in this particular community, the site became a negative thing. They didn't want memories of that negative thing that had happened. It had negative thoughts and negative things connected to it. The businesses sort of there were some closures. They lost a lot of business, and it really impacted the community broadly. Additionally, there were things like getting assistance to the victims and victims' families. These particular families who were U.S. citizens, but because of their immigrant background and immigrant-connected families, did not want to accept assistance from the state of California, any sort of federal assistance that came, because they did not trust, if you're giving me this, what do I have to do in return? Or what does that open up? Are you going to look at my visa, and does that open me up to suspicion for such things? Then there was the added, mental health issue that was on top. We have a lot of new policies around the country about mental health and gun violence. And unfortunately, what we learned in this process was they're largely in English, which understandably a large portion of our population does speak English. But for those in communities which are called limited English proficiency, a lot of these materials and things are just not available. So understanding some of the things they might have been able to do, reporting, the issues surrounding the shooter, and et cetera. There were a lot of things that we felt in the aftermath could be improved. And so it was an interesting take on being in a very specific community that had very specific needs. And so I think that was one of the biggest pieces of my work during Capitol Hill. Currently, most recently, I represent the County of Los Angeles, so I work on their Health and Human Services portfolio, and the issue of SNAP benefits has been a huge, both on the national level, but also at a county level. We are one of the largest county in the country. And so the impact to the number of people and families and residents that has had has been extremely difficult to try to mitigate.
Yeah. And, that's a fact that's lost on a lot of people, that Los Angeles County is the largest county. Because what about New York? I said, New York, the boroughs are counties. So it's like the New York City is represented in 5 different counties.
Yeah.
When you break it down in county government and folks are like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Yeah. There's a reason why they do stuff. Yeah. So I can imagine that's a heck of an undertaking, especially with the Olympics coming up and all that stuff. That's a good lick to have that contract to be with Los Angeles County. Last question. What advice would you give someone who wants to become a lobbyist?
All right. That's a good one. I say, choose your portfolio and areas in which you're passionate about. I think it does take a lot of passion to get through some of the hoops that you have to jump through. But I think if you're passionate about getting your client in front of whoever they need to be in front of, I think that helps a lot. I would say hone in facial expressions. I have struggled over the last year to have a poker face. And even as a staffer in when I would be on meetings, some of the committee meetings, there's a camera. And, if I'm sitting right behind the member, I would have to sort of hide my face sometimes when I'm hearing other people speak. So I'm working on that one, but it's a great skill to hone in. But I think, and then being on top of the news and what's going on and what's happening, because I think that only helps. If you don't know exactly, if you aren't on top of current events, you can't really help your client in the best way possible. And so, finding out, hey, this is moving, there's something happening here, maybe we can get you attached to that. So,
yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. And one of the things I like about how you do your thing is your website. So I want you to tell people how to reach out to you on that. But the one thing that I like is your blog, because you explain things very, very well. I read the blog and I was like, yeah, she could have had a career like on CNN or Wall Street Journal or something like that, because you can't really tell what side of the issue you're on. You just basically give the facts. And that's in this day and age, that is so important. And you're you don't write often, but when you do write, it's very, very detailed.
Thank you.
And very on point. So for other people to enjoy that website and that blog like I did, how can people reach out to you? How can people, if they want to hire you or they want you to kind of explain how the process works, go ahead and make your pitch.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll put my Venmo in the chat. No. But so my firm is called Torres Consulting, and my website is torresdcconsulting.com. And yes, there's a contact button there. Feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm always trying to just pull out cards, and anybody that's interested, both in learning about a career in, lobbying and policy, and or if they're interested in looking for a lobbyist for their agency.
Well, Kristen Torres, I greatly appreciate that you've stuck your toe in the water and you're out there doing that you're taking your expertise and trying to help people, navigate their way through this political process. Like we've stated in the interview, it's needed, and you may not think it, but if you want to be successful, you gotta have some help. So I appreciate that you've taken the time to do that. And I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
I appreciate so much the opportunity. It's been great to catch up with someone who has some Mississippi background as well as state legislature experience. So thank you.
Yeah. Amen on the Mississippi part. So happy holidays to you. And again, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys. And we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right. And we are back. So I want to thank Cheryl Ann Wadlington and Kristen Torres for coming on the program. Miss Wadlington, as you can tell, has been around the block a little bit. And she is really, really passionate about helping these young women achieve an 100% success rate right? Getting young women into college to go through her program. And she's had at least 10,000 girls go through this program. That's incredible, right? That's what we need. We need people that have the ability, the resources, the fortitude to help. And although government resources are welcome, Ms. Wadlington has proven that self-sufficiency could be the key. And, that's one thing I've always wanted to make clear as somebody that's been an elected official, somebody that's been in the process, and somebody that's been lobbying, right? Been an activist. Sometimes we gotta handle our own business, especially those of us in the Black community, and then let others come in once they see the work that we're doing. And hopefully they're coming in to help and not try to stop us. Right. So Ms. Wadlington, I have the utmost respect for you and the work that you're doing. And I'm really, really sincere about that. I just, I was telling her about Piney Woods Country Life School and, just my brief time there, just to say that I was a part of that, where I actually saw young men and women graduate and get accepted to college or, enlist in the military, to see them win 4-H events, even a basketball state championship, right? I mean, it was just a magical moment to just be a part of that history, to meet Kathy Hughes and knowing that her grandfather was the reason why that started. It just incredible, right? And, but those are the stories. Those are the things that are happening that some people either don't want you to hear about it or don't believe that it exists because they have this preconceived notion about how Black folks in America are, how African Americans really operate, right? And this is nothing new. We have had to do this in our whole existence here. And when the federal government or the state governments can help out, it's been a blessing. But self-sufficiency and being creative in our self-sufficiency has always been our go-to, because a lot of times we felt that nobody was on our side but us, right? And there's a lot of us that still feel that way. So my goal with this podcast is not only to talk about politics as, who's winning elections and positions on policies and, shenanigans and all that stuff, but also to talk about and uplift the people who are doing the work and to let folks know that in the Black community, there's a balance between government and taking care of ourselves. We're not looking for handouts. Let me repeat that. Not looking for handouts. Either you're going to help us or you just get out of our way and let us do what we got to do. That's the mindset of Black folks in America. That's where we are, right? And then I want to thank again Kristen Torres for coming on. Miss Kristen is, we got a Mississippi connection. And again, regardless of your race, Mississippi is a state where either you're going to help us or you need to get out of our way so we can do what we got to do, and especially, in these post-slavery times, because Mississippi, when it was the antebellum, Mississippi was one of the richest states in America. Then after the Civil War, after slavery ended, Mississippi descended into being one of the poorest states. But the people have managed to keep things going. And the people that leave Mississippi or, make it to the spotlight, you see what kind of resourceful people they are. You see what kind of hardworking people they are. You see what kind of committed people they are, whether it's through their faith or through their job or through their politics, whatever. Mississippi is a very unique place. And the only thing I regret about Mississippi is that people that don't get the big picture get some of the big prizes down here. And those who do get the big picture of Mississippi tend to leave. Because when they make decisions about where we're going to work and how I'm going to take care of myself or my family, it's a struggle to do it in Mississippi because the powers that be don't get the big picture. And I'm not trying to be disparaging to those people. What I tried to do when I was elected, what my successor tried to do, my predecessor tried to do, just in our little old, District 72, was to try to enlighten people and say, hey, look, you got an opportunity here. You can make this a blank canvas and turn Mississippi into the most unique state in the nation and the most prosperous. But you got to let us paint on the canvas too. You got to let us put our input, our stamp on it. Right? So, that was always kind of my frustration. And that's why I pursued public office there. That's why I was, I stayed and was a lobbyist there and that, because Mississippi is a good spot for people. Of course, I have a vested interest because of family, right? Part of my origin story is Mississippi, right? That's where my dad was born. And so, I care about Mississippi. I have family there. I care about Mississippi. I got family here in Georgia and I care, right? So I want to see Georgia do well, right? Was born in Illinois. I want to see Illinois do well, especially Chicago, right? But I have a vested interest in the country because I'm a citizen and I care. So, I do what I do because I care. And this sister, Kristen Torres, does what she does because she cares. And so if you need a lobbyist, especially, you're trying to work some up at the Capitol Hill, you need to reach out to her. Right. And, she's, just, there's a way to get in touch with her, just like you can get with Miss Wadlington if you want to donate to her cause too. Just, there are people that care and they're not all just black people. There are good people here in this country. Despite the image that's being projected on your television screen or throughout the world, the majority of the people in this country care. And they believe in doing things well, and they believe in people living abundantly. They don't really want to see other people suffer, but they do have a selfish interest to make sure that they're not suffering too. And we have to respect that, and we have to balance that. And when people, because we encourage folks for self-care, right? I've had numbers of guests that advocate that. You've got to take care of yourself to take care of others. So we get that. But we also have to never lose our empathy, which I think is where we're at politically now. I think there are people who think it is fashionable to not have empathy. I think there are people now who think that it is fashionable to be callous, right? And so every election, especially from this point forward, we have to remind them that empathy is okay. Giving a damn about your fellow citizen is really the objective. The preamble of the Constitution says that we're supposed to promote the general welfare, right? You can't promote the general welfare if you don't give a damn about your fellow citizen. You can't do that. We want everybody to have their individual liberty to believe and practice their faith and love who they want to love and all that stuff. But you have to be reminded that we're in a society together, and we do have to look out for one another. We do have to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. We do have to do that, because that's the only way that we can continue to move forward. You know, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, a number of people don't get that. And, you know, or they get too selfish, right? You know, because there's a moment where we have to take care of ourselves, but sometimes we have tunnel vision, and what may be great for you may be terrible for your neighborhood. Case in point. So I don't know if you've heard this story before about the deer, but there was a young lady who had a deer show up in her yard, and I think it was somewhat injured or whatever. So she kind of nursed that deer, and then the deer didn't want to leave. Deer felt safe. So she reached out to the city leaders, and they kind of told her, well, hey, you know, state law doesn't allow you to have a deer as a pet. So she got with her local legislators and asked them to introduce a bill. And the bill had traction, and she got media attention. And so now we are literally voting on a bill to allow her or anybody else in the state of Mississippi to have wildlife as pets. And you could tell that the tide was kind of like, well, if we vote on it here, then the other side's going to pass, you know, kill it or whatever. And I wasn't chancing that. And so I, along with a couple other folks, got up there and railed on the idea. And I reminded people that while it is good that she has this good heart and she wants to take care of this animal, her neighbors could contract Lyme disease. It could be an epidemic. And it's not the fault of the deer, it's just the way nature works, you know. And, you know, a neighbor gets bit by a tick, another neighbor gets bit by a tick, and all of a sudden we've got an epidemic. And so even though her heart was in the right place, and it seems like a good thing, it would not be beneficial to the welfare of her neighborhood for her to have that deer. And fortunately, you know, the bill died and it never came back up. And it wasn't that it was out of anger that I opposed it, but it was out of a general concern that sometimes we can see things and think, oh, this is great for me. But how is that hurting other folks? You say, Erik, well, where are you going with this deer story and blah, blah, and this, that, other. So let's talk about tariffs. So the president of the United States believes that tariffs are the way to go. There's an old school of thought going all the way back to the Gilded Age of America, like the turn of the century, like the 19th to the 20th century, right? You know, they felt that in order for America to succeed in production and industry, economics, whatever, you know, and minimize competition, you got to tariff the hell out of imported goods. Well, it's a strategic tool. You know, if you see that the steel market, for example, the American steel market is being undercut, right? So you put a tariff on the country that's undercutting American steel to raise that price up. So our steel would be competitive here. And people got to make a choice. Well, if I'm going to pay $20 for steel here and $19.50 with the tariff with steel from, say, Japan, I might as well go with the American. It's 50 cents, right? If you didn't have the tariff, the steel from Japan might be $10 or $9. But you put the tariff on it, okay, well now it's, okay, we'll go with that, right? And then especially if you are trying to build an industry up and you're trying to buy some time for that industry to get into the marketplace, you might want to put a tariff on the country that producing the product that this industry is developing, right? And for argument's sake, you might think, well, a blanket tariff policy on every nation in the world, including nations that don't even trade with us, nations that don't even have people. They just have penguins. You want to put a tariff on everybody. You're thinking, and you're trying to sell it as if, oh, we're going to generate all this money. We're going to be able to knock down some of the national debt. We're going to be able to fund some things that we need to fund in the government. And we're trying to convince people to buy American stuff, right? All that sounds great. But what you're really doing by doing it this way is hurting everybody. You're not only hurting the Americans who are consumers, who are trying to buy something for Christmas, or trying to buy something for graduation, or trying to buy something for somebody's birthday, or just trying to buy something because I got this new job and I need this suit, or I need this dress, I need these shoes. You're hurting these people because now they have to adjust their budget to say, well, can I get what I want? I just got to get what I can, along with dealing with the groceries and the utility bills, right? And I'll get to utilities in a second. But you're putting a burden on folks, and then you're putting a burden on some of the people you call yourself trying to help, like farmers. Because you've put this tariff on soybeans, folks are going to other countries to buy the soybeans. They're bypassing us. And we're one of the largest, if not the largest, soybean producer in the world. But people are bypassing us because of tariffs, right? And so now you're going around saying, well, I'm going to take some of that tariff money and bail some of y'all farmers out. Somebody put it very succinctly and said, that's like an arsonist setting a fire, and then he gets on the fire truck and come put the fire out. If you never set the fire in the first place, there's no for you to get the fire truck. If you didn't do the tariffs, there wouldn't be need for a bailout, right? And so for all these people that's paying the tariffs, including the farmer, for whatever equipment they got to get, so they're being bailed out with their own money, which, that's what government does. That's why we pay taxes. But just think about that. If we didn't have the tariffs in the first place, they wouldn't need to be bailed out, right? Another example. So we're talking about this AI stuff, right? And, everybody's tried their Chat GPT or Google Gemini or whatever AI thing you use to help you write sentences or papers or come up with ideas about things, to help your social media presence be better. Come up with some cool pictures, whatever you want to do, right? But then, artificial intelligence is used in an industrial sense. It's also used in law enforcement. AI is prevalent everywhere now, right? And so, the technology, we're advancing. That's a good thing, right? It may be good for some people. But remember those utility bills I was telling you about? To generate the power, to generate the computers, to do the AI stuff, water and electricity are needed, especially as we have these hydro plants powering these electric turbines so we can get the juice to run all this AI stuff. And it's like, everybody's like, oh, well, we gotta build our capacity and all that stuff. So that means more water resources needed, more electricity being used. Rates are going to go up. Rates are going to go up for water usage. Rates are going to go up for electric usage. Because not only do you have to make sure that those are powered, but you got to distribute the electricity to the grid. So everybody has their juice. So when it's cold, they don't have natural gas. They use electric heating. They can stay warm. In the summertime, all those air conditioners, 98% of the air conditioners are electric. And there's some parts of the United States where if you don't have air conditioning, people would not be living there. That's why the air conditioner is considered one of the greatest inventions in the history of mankind, right? But that takes electricity. Your electric bill goes up. If you don't have budget billing, your electric bill goes up in the summer and goes down in the winter for most people, right? Now, AI, like we said, great thing. But if you do too much of it, you get down a rabbit hole and just have tunnel vision. There's a environmental and economic impact that's hitting everybody else. That's why you can't be too selfish. You have to have a balance. You have to care what other people think. But when we have a political climate where it's like, I want y'all to be loyal to me, but I don't give a damn about you. I could care less about you. And that example is being displayed from the White House. That doesn't set a positive role model for the rest of us. There's literally a generation of human beings that all they've known is this one man being the president of the United States with somebody that served 4 years in between. Literally. Right? I have lived through and seen a Reagan generation, a Clinton generation, and an Obama generation. My parents lived through a Roosevelt generation and a Kennedy generation, right? So now there's people that's going through a Trump generation. And so if the leader of the free world, the most powerful man, quote unquote, on the planet, shows no care, shows no empathy, shows no loyalty to just the very country that he represents on the world stage, that's going to have an impact on people, children growing up in this world, people that are becoming young adults, becoming politically active. And so when we lift that kind of behavior up or tolerate it even, it's not good. We have to be a nation in order to fulfill our destiny, fulfill our creed, fulfill our objective to be the city on the hill. We have to care about each other. You ain't got to like me. I ain't got to like you. But if you're struggling and I can help, I'm going to do that. And I hope you would do that for me. And that's the country I want to live in. That's the country I believe that I do exist in. It's just that we have these moments where we get caught up in our pain and our anger, and we forget our empathy, and we allow people that don't give a damn about us to make decisions about our well-being. So I'm just asking you all, please, focus in on the good. Take care of yourself, but make sure that once you are solid, that you do your part to make sure other folks are solid too. Because that's what the real meaning of being an American is. Not some tough guy that can order somebody to fly a drone and blow up a boat. Not some guy that thinks it's all right to lie to an elected official or cuss out a reporter or to own somebody, right? I thought we got the memo that owning people is not cool in the United States. They literally fought a war about owning people, right? Let's get out of that mindset. We can compete for things, but we can't be destructive in our competition. We can challenge authority, but we don't want to substitute authority for anarchy or collective authority for a monarch. We need to focus. We need to care. We need to be empathetic. It's not weak to give a damn about your fellow human being. It's actually the opposite. Weakness is being selfish. Because if you're willing to give your life, if you're willing to sacrifice a part of yourself, if you're willing to share your knowledge, that is strength. That is confidence that I can contribute to something positively. Weakness is keeping all the knowledge, all the money to yourself because you don't think that you can share with anybody, or else that makes you less than. That's weakness. So anyway, our politics has to be about helping. Our politics has to be about empathy. Our politics has to be about giving a damn. And I'm hoping from this point forward, that's what we'll strive every day to do. All right. Thank y'all for listening. Until next time.
NBG Podcast Network.